Hello, my name is Kristen Bolden and welcome to The Other Side of History. We have talked about Patrick in Ireland and Columba in Scotland, Dynuth in Wales. These were all apostles to the Celtic people. Now the next person that I would like to talk about is a man by the name of Aidan, who was called to be an apostle to a different race, and that was the pagan Anglo-Saxons of England. Now the pagan Anglo-Saxons, they not only conquered Britain, but they also helped to destroy the primitive British church, which was holding on to that pure faith, and they had a stronghold in Britain. However, God preserved the primitive faith through this man, Aidan, and his successors. They were able to subdue practically 2/3 of their heathen conquerors, these Anglo-Saxons, and it was by the power of the gospel. Nearly 200 years later, Aidan's influence, it was still felt. Aidan had been there at Iona, the island that had the training school that was set up by Columba. The school of Iona had grown into a well-equipped university. Scholars of renown filled its chairs of instruction. While Aidan was at Iona, the guest house it was always occupied. Many travelers of the high seas, they stayed there from all over the world. They were from Iceland in the north and the Holy Land in the south, and they were from many different parts all over the world. Aidan loved to talk to these guests, and he eagerly devoured all the knowledge that was imparted by these navigators. King Oswald of Northumbria, he was king at this time, and he had the pure faith. He requested for Iona to select one of their students to come and to be an evangelist for him and to work there for the pagan Anglo-Saxons. Now the man that was chosen was distinguished both by his life and his learning. However, when this chosen leader returned home, he was filled with complaints, kind of like those 10 spies, that had brought back that negative report of Canaan. He said that the Anglo-Saxons were a fierce people and that the obstacles to overcome were very great. He lacked the faith to serve, while at the same time as he seemed to kind of want to be in the limelight. Anyhow, Aidan, he was young, but he had much patience, gentleness, and love, which was all needed in winning the pagan Anglo-Saxons to Christ. Now, in the end, it was Aidan who was chosen to go instead of the one that had been first chosen. And Aidan, he accepted this call. Aidan had an ally that was in high places. The King Oswald was a true Christian and had himself come out of paganism. He knew of the national hatred of his pagan people for the Britons, which led to the slaughter of about 1,200 students. If you heard my talk on Dynuth and King Arthur, there was a meeting of the Welsh with the church there of Rome. And here the Roman bishop, Augustine, had said, "If you will not join us in unity, you shall from your enemies suffer the vengeance of death." Well, not long after this threat, the Welsh church, they lived to see a terrible slaughter of their young ministerial candidates in a war that was waged against the Welsh church. A great army was raised to war against them. As the invading king was prepared to attack, he noticed a group of about 1,200 young men, and they were all engaged in prayer. These men were from the Welsh training school and were opposed to bearing arms. They were praying for the soldiers of their own nation who were fighting for national existence against the Anglo-Saxons. Upon learning who these 1,200 men were, the invading king, he shouted that their prayers showed on which side they stood, even if they did not bear arms, and that he would slay them. In fact, he would slay them first. By his wicked command, practically all of them were exterminated that very day. So these scenes King Oswald had witnessed. He had also witnessed the conversion of his pagan father, the king, to the Roman religion. Oswald had himself been compelled to flee his own land to find asylum there at Iona. Can you picture this? A prince fleeing his own land and country because of religious persecution. At least he found refuge with those holding to the primitive faith there at Iona in Scotland. When Oswald became king, he took the throne, and the Roman bishop wanted to remain, of course, in power. But instead, Oswald wanted his people there in Northumbria to walk in the ways of Columba. And this is why he asked for an evangelist from the school there at Iona. Northumbria was an Anglo-Saxon kingdom, which, after it had lapsed from Romanism, was won to Christ by the Celtic Church. And this was done by the efforts of Aidan. Now, Aidan's efforts are a wonderful testimony to the power of the gospel. Aidan's success was not only from the virtues of his preaching, but also the dedication of his personal life. Each day, the number of proselytes, they increased, and within a few years, the Church of Northumbria was fixed on a solid and a permanent foundation. Aidan was never idle. His industry was amazing. In him was the flame of living fire that blazed so gloriously that in not only him, but many of the young missionaries sent from the schools of Patrick and Columba, they just had this burning fire within them. Aidan cared not for anything in this world. He would often give to the poor the little that he did have. He would rather go on foot than horseback, and when he saw any that were infidels, and it didn't matter if they were rich or poor, he invited them to embrace the mystery of the gospel. If they were already believers, he sought to strengthen them in their faith. The gospel work was spreading to other Anglo-Saxon kingdoms because of the efforts of King Oswald and Aidan. The fruit was starting to be able to be seen. Aidan was known as a man of prayer. He would withdraw into his closet and he would shut the door. On bended knee, he poured forth his fervent supplications to God. His mind and perception was clear as to truth and to duty, and his life was a saving, transforming influence to all of those that were around him. His gentle and loving heart had great tenderness towards sinners, the poor, and the afflicted. Slavery existed in Aidan's day, and he was deeply concerned for their welfare. He devoted much of his attention to the ransoming of slaves. Aidan also founded church schools and training colleges. At the beginning of his ministry, King Oswald had actually given him an island, and it was called Lindisfarne. Like Columba had been given that island there at Iona, Aidan was given this island, which he also made into an educational center. He took Iona as a model, and he did for England what Columba had done for Scotland. The island there of Lindisfarne, was situated on the eastern coast of Northumbria, and it was near to the capital of the kingdom, but sufficiently off the main thoroughfare there to give proper surrounding for an educational center. The fields were used to give work, to support the students, as well as to furnish food for the faculty there and the pupils. It was the purpose of the Celtic Church to plant many centers all over the place, rather than to concentrate both the numbers and the wealth into some ecclesiastical capital. This principle that was advocated by this church in the wilderness is a good principle for us to follow still today. We should have smaller centers in many different locations and not have all the numbers and the wealth concentrated into one big mega center. Columbus School there at Iona in Scotland and Aidan School in Britain, they both limited their buildings to what was just for the necessities of the school. Aidan's work was a triumph for truth. First, paganism, it was swept away and replaced by the religion founded upon Bible doctrines. These early Christians, they recognized the need for training schools for their young people if they were to keep them firm in the faith that was passed down to them by the prophets and Jesus himself and the apostles. The Christian education that follows these principles today, it has a great legacy. There was Lucian's Theological Training School there at Antioch. The schools that were founded by Patrick and that dotted Ireland's lush green countryside. Then there was Columba's famous training school there in Scotland, on the island of Iona. Then there was Aidan and his training school on the island of Lindisfarne, there in Britain. It is a sad fact that much of how God has led us as a people in his past, it's been forgotten. Along with that history, much of his teachings have also been forgotten. The amazing history from this most important book, Truth Triumphant by B.G. Wilkinson, that we've been going through, it shows how the Sabbath is not only a defining mark of God's people throughout history, but it shows how it has been preserved down throughout history. Now, if you visit Trinity College in Dublin, you will see a rare copy of a book that is believed to be copied there at Columbus School around 800 AD. It's called the Book of Kells and is also sometimes known as the Book of Columba. And it's the oldest known European manuscript today, and it gives us a glimpse into the art and the style of ancient Scotland and Ireland. It includes all 4 of the Gospels, written in Latin, on approximately 185 calfskins. Now, what makes this copy so unusual is the beautiful artwork surrounding the written text. The colors made from pigments taken from crushed oak apples and beetles' wings are still rich and bright even after all of these centuries. The Celtic Church's doctrines were founded on the purity of the scriptures. They taught that on the cross, Jesus died the death that we deserve, and that the 10 Commandments are to be honored and obeyed, and that Saturday is the Sabbath, the day of rest, and that marriage is honorable. Patrick himself, he married, and he allowed his pastors to marry. They believed in the divinity of Christ, baptism by immersion, the inspiration of the scriptures, the atonement and Christ's mediatorial role in the heavenly sanctuary, the prophecies connected with the last days, and the principles of healthy living. Let our faith be strengthened as we learn of these defenders of the truth through centuries of trial and persecution. In understanding this history, we will also understand how Satan works to rid the world of a knowledge of God and his truth. As Protestants, this is our history. Let's learn its lessons so that we can confidently walk where Jesus leads us in these last days. So, have you enjoyed this talk. I hope you have. If you have enjoyed it, I just would encourage you to click on that subscribe button and like button. And I just want to thank you for listening, and God bless.